Alright, locomotive maintenance and repair. Locomotive in the traffic under the wish for the train, running shed of the district is in wish for the railway to survive with the locomotive running perfectly. The usual practice is for the ordinary running defect with the minor repair of the tin with a small workshop attached with the shed with the facilities provided for the purpose of the depending on the size of the running shed. In such some of the important sheds may be the heavy repair of the now executed. Generally speaking, the running of the shed with the repairs will include with the returning with the tires, the refitting with the axle blocks, bearings, repair of the motion with the brake gear, the fitting of the new springs, stringing and other parts with the other cords, some of the supply with the head cords, minor boiler repairs such for the replacement state. They're also done with the running shed when the lower boiler requires heavy repair of the engine sent away for the principal part. The records of the cap for the mileage and the heavy with the repair done on the engine, however small, with the further periodically examination are made with the most of the important parts of the engine after it has run with a definite number of the mile with a certain length of the time. The firebox would be examined about once a month with the tires actively express the engine with the running of about 4,500 miles. But bogey spring with a July valve would be allowed with the 20,000 miles between each of the periodical examination before the engine is set within principal shop with a heavy repair special report with sent with there some of the weeks advance giving the full particles of the condition principal portion with the new part of the ready with the unnecessary delay with the curve of the after the engine has been set. An engine may be in service with 1 or 2 of the years between the busy with the principal shop. The time depends on the class engine for the service upon which they have been employed with the mile runs in general condition which the run it is. Boiler. The boiler requires more supervision than any other part of the locomotive. The most expensive for the matter of upkeep of the Sir John Aspinall, with the eminent locomotive engineer, once made a statement, which will be endorsed in every locomotive, and then that there was only one thing that would cause the trouble, namely the boiler. The engine part of this quite satisfactory, but never give any trouble. The boiler was an everlasting trouble to make the thorough examination of the boiler tube withdrawn with the increasation due to the water is removed from the plate for the means with a suitable chipping tool for the use of which greater care must be taken with the not to nick the damage to play with the subsequent fracture of the liable to cause liable to result. The steel bar, firebox casing, playing with the liable, the corrosion, pitting of the cracking of the grouping of the corrosion, taking the form of the uniform, the wasting of the plate, whereby the pack thinner become thinner and eventually unable to withstand the pressure required with the form of the corrosion that is often usually found with the longitudinal belt with 1 foot to 2 foot wide near the water level, pitting of the more usually form of the corrosion in which the plate with the honeycomb with the small cavities either isolated running into one over the form of the depression considerable size. The defect is probably caused by the combined chemical and the galvanic action with the dissolve the acids in the water, the scale, the deposit for the feed water, and a thin, heavy help with the protect of the plate for the alternate with the expansion of the contraction of the plate as the heat and cool that helps the detached pieces of the scale, leaving the plates exposed with the action any of the acid of the water made here by the remarks of most boiler firebox troubles are caused by the alternate expansion and the contraction of the different parts of that is where with the tear of the due to cause the quiet different from the operating cylinders of motion groove that usually found with a smoke box tube plate with the foundation ring with a unites the copper box for the firebox to the firebox shell is also due to some of the cause as the tube expands. They tend to push out the center of the tube plate with the rigidly held in the edge for the especially with the joint and flange for the cylinders. The constant bending with the unbending causes the slightly crack and the plate ultimately develops into the groove of the later end being an enlargement of the action acid over the water. The badly groove of the wasted plate was renewed. The defects are not serious enough that the plate is required of riveting the patch over the defective portion. The rivet heads are liable to corrosion. The defective rivets are knocked out and replaced. Figure 24, figure 46 says oval tube holes as in B-crap tubes. Alright, your firebox. The firebox is a particular subject with the defect of the copper plates, especially with the fire hole flange where the plates are united with the wasted head of the action of the flame. The cracks of the fractures is big of the figure 46 of the frequently found across the tube plate between the hole of the tube with the secure with the such cracks are also between the stay holes and all the plate for these cracks are extended rapidly with the care of the taken looking for them in the tube with the stay with the plate extended with the vertical direction when the boiler warms up with the tube holes with the gradually assuming the oval shape of the leakage with the curve of the round tube with the overheating of the plates due to the occasional shortness of the wire causing the burning of the plates, expansion of the contraction, cover the frequent breakage with the shape of the unite with the roof of the outside with the firebox casing, and bulging on the plate with the end result with the presence of the defective side with the shape of the stay and the detected tamping heads of the light hammer, and when the experience when the make can tell them sound. These heads are generally burnt away from the flame, and all these defects, which come, some of the share with the flame, will become dangerous and left there for the region of the firebox thoroughly with examine a frequent regular period with the high pressure for the U of the modern locomotive with 170 to 225 pounds a square inch. Improve the tendency of the firebox trouble with some of the engineers taking advantage of the benefit of the superheating by reducing the pressure to 160 pounds a square inch. Prepare the crack plates with the patch of the various size and shape of the U with the essential for the patching with the cutaway with the defective portion of the plate first. This leaves oval and rectangular hole in the piece for the new copper plate with the mark for the off and cut out slightly larger than the hole with this, so that it was lapped all around with the patches, then carefully bended down with the stab of the holes and rivet the holes with the marked off with the new pieces after, which is riveted with the fastened stud bolts with according to the position which occupied with some of the parts of the firebox. Riveting cannot be done, but it should be notched and some of the plate that never been put with the crack of the old plate with the letter is always cut out with the region where the old plate where there would be off after the patch has been put on. The double thickness of the plate that would reduce the conductivity of the overheating and the burning would result. Figure 47 shows the patches of the firebox plate, and if the firebox plate can be bad condition, lower the half of the way, maybe cut away with the new half side, half tube plate may be riveted with the upper half. When the tube holes at the oval, the figure A with the 46 of the plate with the between the hole with the crack to the B with the hole thing enlarged with the rose bit with the tool with the special A turned with the screw with the plug with the insert of the tightly with the hole of the plugs are riveted over each side with the tube plate with the cover of the cracks and the plate with the possible plugs is not left on the solid after the drill and receive the new tubes as which are somewhat smaller than the tubes which were previously in the hole. Figure 48 show the two of these bush holes in the section. Every 5 or 6 years, the entirely new firebox is required with the involved the stripping the whole hole in the interior with the boiler cutting through the knocking of the out all the state, the removing of the foundation ring of the boiler with the undergoing the repair and turned upside down with the new firebox support. The new boiler, see the chapter 2 with the whole boiler is required with the renewal after 12 to 16 years. The comparatively simple matter of the old boiler being lifted away from the frame, the new one plate for the described in chapter 8. Your firebox states leaking and broken firebox is the constant source for the trouble. The leaking with the copper shape of the dubia with the condition may be the same with the running and shed with the heads being lightly riveted over the caulk with the lightly tube with the circular head with the principal the trouble. However, with this broken shape, this is defective shown in figure 49 with the copper inside of the firebox the same with the vertical direction as the seam is being raised, rises to the say as bent and inclined as shown in figure A. Since for the outer steel firebox is shell which the stay connected does not rise rapidly to the same extent, but the constant bending and re-straightening of the stays because of the cracking of the B and finally cracks of the C, with the putting of the new stay holes and the slightly enlarged tab of the new screw with the threads fitted with the corresponding larger stays. Figure 49 is the cracked broken stays with the heads wasted away in the inside firebox. Tubes. The chief defect of the tubes, steel tubes are one, pathetic of the outside of the tube with some of the cause of the pitting of the boiler plates, more particular to leakage of the firebox tube plate. For the former leakage were stopped temporarily by driving the conical tool known as the drifting of the open side firebox end of the tube with the force of the metal of the tube against the walls of the tube holes and the most various injuries of the tube plate with the U with the no forbidden instead. The special tube expander is U with the consist is a casing with which for the entire tube with the tube and then the air slots R slots. Through the number of the small rollers protrude with the slightly axis over the rollers being the nearly parallel to the axis for the tube with any internal conical mandrel can be pushed in by with the operative with the cone gradually forced with the roll it outwards and inside of the wall with the toe resolve of the roller roll with the metal of the tube against the tube plate with the making the tube tight the joint. In some case with the soft copper ring of the ferrule plate between the outside of the tube with that hole with the tube plate with the ferrule begin practical squeeze between the tube and the plate with the outer end of the tubes projected with the firebox at 3/8 inch afterwards be worked over against the fireplace of the tube plate. Your safety valves. Okay, the valves these and other steam valves are slightly valved with the seat with this a leak with the head then ground in with the light fine with the emery with the oil sink into the valve with the seat with the valves around rotated backwards and forwards until the both of the ground together at the perfect seating which can be seen by the dark color all around the bearing of the face. Frames occasionally give way the breaking of the inside corner of the recess into with the driving horn block fits as soon as if A figure 17 alternates others and pull due the steam action for most Shortly at these two corners. The repair of the frames may be either patch of the weld the patch of the piece of the plate with about 7/8 of an inch thick cut with the embrace of the upward portion of the horn block covered with the fracture. Welding is now being the more useful either with the axial and electrical arc with the process both the process with the crack of the chip with the out with the V group formed into the molten metal and deposited with the flame and the arc produced with the solid weld. Great care that has been taken to especially accelerate process. The concentration of the framework cooling after the operation does not call the new break. Or cylinders. Defects with them right with the cylinder's principal over the wear over the bore of the wear of the port faces over with the valve with the work with the crack with the broken cylinders. In this case, with the cylinder and the circular port with the piston valve is shown in figure 22. These ports are provided with an internal circular line through the necessary point holes over the cut with as though these portions with the action of the ring of the piston valves. They can be replaced with the new liners and the cylinder casting when itself remains uninjured and intact. The refacing of the port faces of the slide valve engine the reboring of the cylinder themselves with the later when they're not taken out of the engine frame. To do this will be too expensive for the operation. Port facing of the boring machine are used, which are fixed with the front of the cylinders. The buffering beam having been taken down, these machines were formerly worked on by hand. Now the electric motor actuated through them. The situate the suitable gearing. The bores are carefully calibrated, just sufficient metal to remove the meet the truly circular new position head. The greater diameter required of the cylinders to be rebored. For cracks and breaks of the cylinder must be removed with the frame of the cracks in our series. The cylinders replaced with a new one. Some of the cracks exterior patched with the gun metal patches, casting of the wood pattern, especially made to fit with the counter with the defective part. If the tops of the cylinders are corroded with the small smoke box ashes, it will also contain sulfur, and patch with the copper plate is made with the fit with the bolted on. If the port faces are badly worn, these face up with the plates of the form faces are screwed on, which is the machine with the original dimension. Crack bridges between the ports are may be repaired by the cutting away of the metal on each side of the crack of dovetailing. A piece of each was into the space formed. Facilitating welding has been used chiefly in America with repairing cylinders, especially in the case of the flanges are broken. Wheels and axle, with the exemption of the bullets, require more attention than any of the other engine of the wheel century for themselves. With rarely crack, knowing that they are on the cast steel of the form of wrought iron driving. Wheels sometimes crack between the spokes and the both of those are not made now. Through the considerable number that still serve as the broken and flawed tires are replaced immediately, no attempt is being made to repair them by welding. The chief defect of the tires are originally wear and surface through the which they tread on. The rail decreases the diameter of the flange, therefore becomes deeper the relatively the tread, with shown with the dotted line figure B 50 or figure 50. Tread on thread tire is shown with the wear in section after returning, and when it becomes too deep, it's liable to catch the crossing of the line, becoming the source of danger. Tires are not removed from the wheels, but the whole set putting the wheel layout and return with the returning that also has been done with the flat pieces occurred with the tires. Very probable the wheel layers, for the sense of the number that exceedingly large as the hard spots also found. The shreds of the tires have then some of the tire time over the surface due to the unavoidable with the considerable waste of the metal occur if the tires are returned within the first place. Much of the metal has been turned off to produce the new proper contour C with the tread in the shape of the flange of the second level in case of the engine for the 4-6 wheel coupled with the wheels wear down the unequal diameters so that when the smallest wheel of the set of the 6 wheels has been turned down, the other 5 wheels must be turned exactly with the same diameter. More than metal that has been removed that would be necessary for each with the wheel with an independently coupled wheel with even slightly unequal diameters caused the greater strain with the coupling rod also produced the noising side with the slide actions engine when running figure 50A with the contour over the tread with the tire new with the wire wears down with the B with the tire return to the new contour C. Tires are usually about 3 inches thick with the new button, owing where with the returning with eventually about attaining the thickness of the wheels will not allow the safety return when the wheels up to 5 and 6 inches may be returned as long with the tires for some condition provided with the tires not as less than 1 1/2 inch with the thick after returning the button, but the wheels are larger than 5 foot 6 inches. Limits of thickness return about 1 3/4 inch. Axles, especially driving crank axles, are subject to very heavy bending of the twisting force of the watch and carefully through the flaws and cracks. If a minute crack begins with showing itself, the axle may be allowed to run until the crack develops, and when the axle is immediately condemned, the wheels are forced off the hydraulic pressure, new axle so is substituted. Other than the flaw of the chief running defect of the overall wear with the journals working inside with the axle box, similar over the wear with the crank pins, driving axle to restore the journal with the true circular from the wheels, or putting the wheel layout with the very lightly cut with the turn off the axle axle journals for truing up the crank pins with the crank axle. The portable machine is clamped to the crank pin webs, and the axle remains stationary with the cutting of the tools remote revolves around the crank pin. Or your axle box, the box where for the flange side with which is constantly moving up with the down with the horn block with the guides for the under of the action with the spring with the thrust pull with the rod with the driving with a couple of axles actually insinuate with the wear of the axle box with the such action with the horn block guides with also with the wear later or fixed up with the first. They may be done with the plate with the engine with either by filling or using a surfaceable plate with the defect of the high plate for the means of portable facing machines and horn blocks may be removed, regrounded. The axle box are then lifted and blinded up. The deficiency across the face with the horn blocks is made with a riveting brass liner, one side by the white metaling side with the proper thickness to the side of the frame with the box fitted with the horn block with the crown of the brass. Bear's journal will be worn down with the box filling. Generally require new brasses. If not badly worn, the old brasses may be remetaled with the white metal with the centuries are marked off with the boxes and placed with the engine, but the boxes are then sent with the machine with the reborn with the centuries must be properly located. Distance apart with the different axles exactly correct. Alright, the most and etc. Connecting and the coupling of the rods, examine the flaws if they have them found with the value of the rods at once with the end. They usually fall with the connection rod occur with the big end of the trap at the corner and the bolt hole. If the traps have been smaller with the independent piece, it's not so expensive to renew. The rods are also tested for straight if with the straight edge with the straps or with the required filling up with perhaps the closing a little with a little at the jaws and perhaps frequently new. Must be perfect in the trap that may be perfect the square with the rods brasses have been fitted with the bolt up at the ends of the place for the rod and length of the bench between the centers of the big and small ends of the rod of the trammel to the dimensions shown on the drawing. The centuries are marked at the end of the set with the machines bored out to the side with the crank of the journal, pin and journal, which they are fitted with the coupling rods are more easily with the repair than having new white metal circular pushes pressed and solid into the rod. The work is done with a small hydraulic press. Slide bars are regrounded in the grinding machine and set up on the engine similar manner, so that the new engine with the erection shop is slide valve with the reface with the worn tube through the otherwise defective renew the piston rod valve spindles require the returning and the regrinding of the very unevenly with the glands and found to be hand badly scored. Groove screw heads and cutter holes of the rear though examine the flaws which are found with the cause of the rods to be condemned. The various pins on the valve gear where the slack within their holes with the holes linked with the width or path of the pounds and enlarged the metal being the case hardened with the holes cannot be rebored, but they may be made true with the lapping them out of the lace and lead mandrel. Using the emery and oil with the alternative the use of the rapid method of now generally employed with the special grinding machine with a very small wheel. They enlarge the hole that their new pins are required. But in many cases, the holes are bushed in the hardened steel bush of the wearing surface the quadrant length of the regrinding with the lapped out with a great care over the should be taken with the oil holes and proper position thoroughly cleaned out. The brake gear is overhauled with adjusted the new cast iron blocks and provided with the various output of their detail for the numbers for the description primer remains only the dimension putting together in the engine very similar in erection over the new engine described in chapter 8. And then it goes into the index and then a list of books that you can, and this was a reading of this book was the Steam Locomotive Construction Maintenance by Ahrens.